All right. Welcome to episode 4 of the Admin Bar. We made it all the way to 4, Matt.
How do you like that?
I didn't even think I could count that high, but somehow we did it 4 weeks in a row. Hello, everyone. I am Kyle Van Duzen, half of the Admin Bar. I own Ogle Web Design in Texas. And of course, with me is Matt Siebert from Matthew Siebert Design, all the way in Keene, New Hampshire, which I recently found out holds the Guinness Book of World Records record for most carved jack-o'-lanterns in one place.
And
Why don't you
lit.
tell us all about that?
They have to be lit to be counted. And if you look it up, we get a little bit crazy about our pumpkins. One of the last times this whole shindig went down, there were riots in the streets. Cars got flipped over. Lots of fires. You think I'm joking?
Not much to do.
I'm really not.
Not much to do in New Hampshire.
I was sitting here going, can't tell if serious.
Oh, very serious. Yeah, it was kind of a nightmare.
That's awesome. Well, as you can see, we have Walt, Spence, and Lee Jackson joining us today. So I'm super excited to have them here. So Walt, why don't you start us off and tell us all about yourself quickly?
Well, Walt Spence, international man of mystery on Twitter at Walt Spence. Been into many different ventures, whether they be startup, web agency. Now I'm pivoting more to voice. Still doing the whole web app thing, but trying to branch out and do some different things. Give a little bit of a fresh look for myself. So.
Nice. And Lee, what do you do, sir?
Also an international man of mystery. That's how me and Walt know each other. We're in the same agency, and I think we've just blown our cover, mate. I run a
watching, literally.
It's fine.
No,
you can cut that bit out then.
There's 8 people watching, so
eight people.
Everybody knows now.
I run a web agency. We service design agencies, and we build WordPress themes and plugins for those agencies. We're essentially a white labeled development house. And I also run a different business as well, where we look after event companies all around the world, and we give them cool event websites using software that we've developed over the last 10 years. So pretty geeky stuff.
Very
Geeky
cool.
is awesome. I love geeky. In fact, part of the reason I asked you on, besides the mystery and good looks, was the fact that you have diversified your business quite a bit, especially just in the time that I've known you, which is probably a little over a year now. So what we're going to be talking about today is kind of setting your agency up for future success. So, I'll get up on Monday morning and plan my day and plan my week. Rarely do I plan out my month, and almost never do I plan much further than that. But I realize at the same time, we are in an industry where things change constantly, so I use Elementor as a page builder, and several years ago that didn't even exist. So I can project forward and say in several years I might be using something completely different. So that kind of, when you base your agency around tools and technology that exists right now, that can put you in a bind later on if those things don't come through or don't stick around forever. So that's one thing I wanted to bring up to you, Lee. You have diversified your business quite a bit. You mentioned a couple things there. You got the agency Trailblazer group and all kinds of stuff. So was that an intentional thing to try, much like when you manage your wealth and you have investments, they say it's important to diversify those things. So if one takes a dive, you got some others. So was that part of your plan, or did that kind of just happen?
Definitely. So I didn't explain. I also run the Agency Trailblazer podcast. We have a community, and I'm also creating content all the time for agency owners to help them run better agencies and be less stressed. The reason for doing 3 different things is literally the old saying about don't put all of your eggs in one basket. So it is diversifying your income streams. So all 3, the event business, the web agency, and Agency Trailblazer, all feed in. They generate income for us. So yes, that's one of the reasons. The other reasons why I started that in particular was because I really wanted to serve the niche that I served with Angle Crown. I wanted to serve them in a deeper way to learn more about the client. clients, help them, and also help myself, as in educate myself, because of what you said. Things are changing all the time. Beaver Builder is our thing. Yours is Elemental, which is cool. We'll have a fight later. This is a bar after all. I'll meet you outside. But we do need to keep in touch with this. What is changing? What are the new tools, etc. So we need to keep educating ourselves. So that was one of the ways that I could educate myself, by serving the community at the same time. So yeah, 3 income streams, and also serving the community so that I can keep learning, because that's one of the most important things you should be doing.
Yeah, I think that's super important. I hadn't been smart enough to think of all those things yet, but that's why we have y'all on today. And in fact, this topic kind of came to my mind when I was chatting with Walt, as we do every once in a while on Messenger, and he was telling me what he had going on, which I found super interesting and still don't hear many people talking about, but it's something that I use all the time. So I have an Alexa in one room, and I have 3 Google Homes spread out throughout the house. And you were telling me about developing skills for Alexa. So how did that come about, and why did you give that a shot?
Quite honestly, it's just been an evolution of one main goal that I've had with every agency that I've had to this point. I always look at things a little bit differently. I don't like designs that have a tendency to be cookie cutter, and I felt like we were going down at one point we were going down that path. And I said, how do we get to the point where we're making, business more personal? Intercom has the overall guiding mission of doing that for web business, but at the same time, I feel like they're failing. And the main reason I feel like they're failing is because every time you ever use a tool that has Intercom, it's a similar away message. Basically, every time you pop up on the page, you have a tendency to dismiss them. Their extensions to actually silence them. So that tells me that they're failing. But the whole thing is, if you as a business aren't finding a way to connect personally to your consumer in 2018, you're kind of failing, because the internet really has become the conduit to relationship. And the only way to keep and retain clients is to actually keep that personal communication channel open, let them know what's going on. So I started thinking, like, with you guys, with the admin bar, and what Lee's doing with Agency Trailblazer, and what other people are doing with their marketing blogs and everything. Pete Everett has a great marketing blog. There's a lot of people putting out great content, and Alexa is growing at an exponential rate. It feels like I kind of missed out on that app craze in 2007, because it wasn't that I didn't believe in it. I just didn't devote the time into looking into it. And when I started seeing the numbers growing in terms of voice skills in the store, then it was a very similar growth path to what the App Store was doing. So, instead of being on the back end of the wave this time, I wanted to be on the front end. And I really believe in the technology, because if you use it intimately every day like I do, it helps you out. It connects you, to things that you're looking for. So no better place to be, especially for a guy that loves podcasts and loves to consume content in that manner when he's working. It's a no-brainer. But stepping back to the business end of it, right now, I think the count last month for just a segment of voice skills is the flash briefing skills. They have already grown like 4,000 in the last month, which is huge, because there was only 13,000 last month. So that's one small segment, though. The overall growth is pretty substantial, and they're putting a huge push behind it, and there are more APIs coming out here in the very near future. But I'm kind of yammering on because I could talk about it all day. But you have to look at the projection of the 5 year as well as what you're doing at this moment.
Yeah, that's super important. And when you first kind of told me that you were doing that, I was trying to think of ways that that would fit into an agency's life. So let's, you're developing, you said you're still making websites. Mm-hmm. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
So are you using those same customers to pitch doing this kind of work too as well?
Absolutely. Actually, it's a holistic approach. You look at what the business does best. If they, if they're good bloggers, then let them blog, and then let Alexa read the thing to the people. If they're good at doing what Lee does in podcasting, it's a shoe-in. They just upload, via voice skill that's basically connecting to the RSS feed for the podcast. So, and basically becomes a podcast player. It's basically about finding a way to become an all-encompassing media company in this day and age where, everybody has a voice, but there's so much signal. I mean, so little signal and so much noise. So it's a matter of finding out where your key demographic is and delivering on what they want through these channels. Now, if you happen to work in like something that's incredibly boring, it's very hard. I don't know. I can't think of anything right now. But you guys,
because you're too cool, man. You can't think of anything boring.
Let's say you're an accountant. It's very hard to talk about taxes 365 on, so I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah. I hope I answered your question.
No, absolutely. And another note I had down, and I think you can probably testify to this, Lee. We haven't seen, at least since I've been doing this, which isn't very long, but the economy ebbs and flows, and there's the global economy, there's the economy within your own country, and then there's like your local economy. In the town I just moved from, of course it's Texas, so most of the economy depended on what the oil fields were doing. So if oil prices were high, everybody in town had money, and when oil prices were low, nobody had money. So a lot of my customers revolved around kind of what that local economy was. And when I started, I thought most of my business would be local, and I realized pretty quickly you got to think a little bit more globally than that. And I know even with how you rebranded Lee Jackson Dev into Angled Crown, that was with the thought of being global. So what kind of I guess difference have you seen marketing to like a more global audience?
Well, two things happened. One, yes, I realized that I wanted to extend my market reach as opposed to just being in the UK. I wanted to cover the world, and we do now. We've got clients in Europe, we've got clients in Australia, America, all over the place. Just not China, because I can't actually read Chinese, so we skipped that one. But the main reason we did that was that we're in a very specific niche, which is agency owners, and we're limiting ourselves and limiting what we can do for our clients if we only look locally. If you are a local web development agency that builds local websites for small businesses, and then there is a problem with the local industry, for example, the coal mine shuts or whatever it is, because that's what we had here in the UK, all the coal mines shut and all that sort of stuff. So an entire industry was wiped out. With Brexit, car companies are leaving, etc. So there is less and less money in certain areas. So that can be quite stressful. I looked like a small one-man band in a local area. The minute I changed to Angled Crown with my message of I help you design agencies or agency owners, that's a universal global message that I can say to anyone, and it doesn't limit me to the economy and the location that I was in. So that was a very purposeful decision so that we could branch out. And we actually now only have 2 local clients, and most of our customers are all around the world.
That's pretty amazing.
I know, it's good. The reason is I hate traveling to meetings.
Me too.
So it's brilliant that everybody's all around the world, because it means nobody expects me to jump in a car and drive and go and see them. Because I'm lazy.
Matt is the opposite. Matt likes to get in those meetings. I think that's where he gets his most.
I'll send Matt.
That's true. I love sitting down with clients, especially new ones. Like the onboarding process is so much fun.
Awesome.
Yeah. With that, the first meeting I definitely like to do in person. After that, I'd rather just sit here in my boxers. But
yeah,
I'm completely undressed from like the navel down. But nobody.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
nobody needs to know.
I shouldn't have said that out loud.
It's okay.
So Matt, I know I want you to kind of talk about too, like when you started this, when you started your business about 9 years ago, you were doing something almost completely different.
I was.
So was part of your decision to move to web to have like a longer term strategy for your business, or what brought that on?
I think it was a mixture of a couple of things. One, I did a lot of branding in the beginning, and branding became a chore, and I definitely didn't want the the thing that I'm most passionate about to become a chore. So I started looking in other directions, and I dabbled a little bit with web, and found that just the structure of everything, the way that it works, the way that it the flow of work, it fit me like much better. So I just followed down that path to see what would come of it, and found what I wanted to do.
And you think you're better set up for kind of facing the things that change? Branding's probably going to stay the same for almost ever. Everybody's needed a logo for a long time. Now the ways you can get logos done has changed a lot and made it a lot harder to, especially for local companies. Selling a logo to a small company is pretty hard to do when they can download one of 500 tools to build their own logo, or use Fiverr or stuff like that.
Yeah, I think the other thing that really draws me into the web development world is that it's always a puzzle. And I'm not saying that layout design or any other facet isn't, but for me, I enjoy the puzzle of web, because it's a lot more than just aesthetics. It's how do you reach the people? What methods are you going to be using? There's a lot more marketing involved, I think, and a lot of it's long tail as well, so you can see the progression. I was doing branding, and I was doing layout designs and advertisements and everything, and they have a relatively short lifespan, especially if you're just doing a show poster. It looks awesome. It's super time consuming to do, especially a lot of the ones that I used to do were actually hand illustrated. And once it's done, it's done. So with web, you can continuously tweak and change and monitor and see exactly what you're doing and how it affects everything. And I think it keeps me interested throughout all of my different projects.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
the digital doing the web is more tactile, right?
Yeah.
You see the results of what you're doing, so I get that completely.
And another thing I want us all to completely speculate on, so we'll just go around the room here. It's fascinating learning about AI tools and so many ways that things can be automated now. So they're coming out with all kinds of new things every day. To me, I don't get too much into it, because until it's real, it's just hard for me to kind of wrap my head around. I'm a pretty simple guy. But what kind of ways do you see automations and artificial intelligence trying to creep into what we do? Lee, I'll let you start.
Well, do you remember the grid? Does anyone remember grid?
With Molly?
Well, the grid was this AI. I don't know if it still exists, and it was this: we will essentially design your website using artificial intelligence. Pre-sell. They did this big pre-sale. People were buying founder member licenses for $99, and it absolutely blew up huge. And they generated millions of pounds, and it launched. And the feedback I've had from people was it was just awful, ridiculously bad. It was just some basic algorithms putting stuff on a page, etc. So right now, AI is definitely not ready for a lot of things, and I'm not even sure if that is even artificial intelligence as opposed to just a very well-programmed routine. The thing that concerns me is that what we all do is becoming slowly eroded and devalued, to the extent that I think people will start to assume that they can use automated builders to present content online. The grid is a very good example of how thousands upon thousands of people all around the world believed that some AI could make them an amazing website that would drive their business. So that really worries me about quote unquote artificial intelligence, or AI, because it's not. So one of the reasons why I have the agency Trailblazers is I want to help people understand that you can't replace, at least not yet, the human brain. We understand things like how to market the business, how to like Matt, he knows how to create a brand that will represent you. Artificial intelligence doesn't. But if people are missing all of these important points and thinking they can lean on AI, then that's one thing that I worry about for the future.
Yeah, I think that AI should be looked at as a tool, just like a computer should be looked at a tool. AI is not going to be able to do good copyright to me. Like I probably will be proven wrong, and somebody will show this to me 15 years from now and be like, "Man, you were an idiot."
15 years is a long time in the future, too.
It's a long, yeah, especially when we look at the exponential growth of this technology. But as far as layout, color design, understanding human behavior on a web page, all it's going to take is plugging in analytics data into the current neural network state that we have out there and machine learning algorithms. And essentially what we do as designers becomes obsolete. Where I think that we need to stand out in the industry is personal service, understanding how to maintain someone's website perfectly, a little bit more on the security side, possibly, with a lot of, concern that people have with cybersecurity now. And, just an overall dedication to who we're working with and understanding what their goals are and understanding how to drive home the end goal, which is for them to convert. And if we start from that end and work out, then everything will be okay. It should be looked at as a tool. And if anybody, comes out or develops one of these, tools in the very near future, that's all you have to present it to them as. Is like, yeah, it's a great tool. But at the end of the day, like, it doesn't have experience with, real people in real situations. And let me show you how this is done. And you can capitalize on that.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, if you think about just graphic design, everything used to be like hand laid, cut out, stenciled. It was a very like hands-on workflow. Then in 1984, Apple came out with their Macintosh, and they started, what was it? The Aldus PageMaker was one of the first layout software available. But regardless of the name, I mean, we're kind of having the same discussion, I'm sure, that people had back then, where you had typesetters saying, well, is this gonna kill our business? And for some it did, and for some it didn't, because they learned the new tech and they embraced it. And now we have Photoshop and Illustrator and all these things that, it did definitely kill part of an industry, but it in a lot of ways made it much, much stronger as well. So I think that's part of future proofing, is to be able to swing and adapt to whatever is coming out.
Yeah, and think about how many businesses, I was talking to Matt a little bit earlier today, and for here, at least here for us, Toys R Us was like the most huge toy store chain. Everybody had a Toys R Us near them. Everybody loved going to Toys R Us. But when internet sales and e-commerce became popular, they were really slow to adapt to that, and their stores started closing, and Amazon started taking all their market share. And then here recently, they're completely bankrupt, and all their stores are closed and they don't exist anymore. And it's because they looked at something as an obstacle instead of how can we use this to grow our business. And by the time they caught around to that, it was just too late for them. So it's the same thing. If there are some AI type tools and we just ignore them, or use them as an obstacle instead of some kind of tool that can help our business or help us help customers, we'll probably end up in the same thing. I did want to comment on here. Matt Davies was talking about how the barrier of entry is so low to be a website designer now, especially all the tools that make it so easy. And one thing I was thinking about was, it's kind of personal to my business, but I noticed that a lot of my customers are older than me. So I'm 34, so they grew, I had a computer in my house and internet by the time I was, 15 or so. So, as much as I can remember, I've had a computer and internet access. But the generation that's older than me, they didn't grow up with any of that. So when you start talking about, you use the word develop a website, and they're already like out on a lot of it. It's just too much. Of course, I'm talking about Texas too. So, but a lot of my customers are of an older generation, and less of them are younger. So I wonder if there's kind of a ticking time bomb when the majority of business owners are from my generation, where they understand computers and how things work a lot more. So you guys got any range on that with your business?
I've totally got an idea on that one. It's a conversation that I've had a lot, but I only need to look at my younger brother, who is 15 years younger than me. He has absolutely no idea about how the internet works or anything like that. He can check Instagram and take pictures, but he's into whatever it is that he does. He doesn't understand how to build a website or anything, and it's very, very common. I'm a very in touch guy with the youth. No, I'm joking, but I know a lot of younger people simply through my brother. I live my teenage years through him, and none of them have a clue. They've grown up with the technology so much so that they don't really understand what it is they have. We all grew up as 30-somethings, and Matt, who's clearly 21, we all had the privilege, I think, of growing up during this as it was evolving. So we all got into it, we've all learned it, and we've learned to understand it, etc. The older generation missed that boat, and the younger generation just take it for granted. So I do think that there is I don't think, there is a ticking time bomb necessarily, because the youth of today don't really seem to care, apart from a few.
They're more focused on social media.
Exactly, and taking selfies, like me.
And, how do I get however many Instagram followers?
Mm-hmm.
How many likes can I get from this picture? Oh, let me delete it and take it down because it didn't get enough. But
shame.
And so many of them too, they're kind of used to the shortcuts. They're looking for the shortcuts. So they'll buy Instagram followers, which will completely kill an Instagram page. And I think that might be an issue as well.
Absolutely. But at the end of the day, a lot of them don't see the value in a website because they haven't been on the internet long enough to understand that platforms closed. And I thought that the tipping point with that would have been when, what was the big one that closed recently? Vine. When Vine closed down and you had all these creators who made their name on there, I thought then, like, okay, the web page is going to start to come back. And it hasn't happened yet. And unfortunately, I don't see it happening until some of these social networks start taking more of a hit for, being a bit of a monopoly. And I don't know if that's going to happen. That's up in the air for the future and how the government defines it. But here in the U.S. specifically, I'm talking about, sorry, but the EU has a big say in it too. So
I hear that. Kyle, actually, you were recently telling me about a client of yours who they had a Facebook page and they were perfectly content. Like, why do I need a website? Because I have a Facebook page.
Yeah, I don't want those customers anymore.
On that though, for future-proofing your business, one of the things that we've been doing is we're part of the SMU. I think it's Rachel Pearson. I can't remember her last name. We're teaching ourselves about social media, about how to run a social media agency, not because we're necessarily thinking we're going to do it ourselves, but because we do want that skill set in our business to be able to run our own business and grow our own business through social media. But also we want to know what rebuttals, as it were, to have to people who would then say, why do I need a website when I've got a Facebook page, etc. And I don't know what those rebuttals are yet, if I'm honest, because we're still learning. But that's one of the things we've been doing on that continuation of educating and investing in ourselves. And it's not just me that's doing that. Larissa, who may be watching this stream, is also learning and going through those courses, etc. Sorry, Kyle, I think you were going to say something, mate.
No, you're all good. No, I think the customer, if I remember right, the one you're referring to, as soon as I gave him a few rebuttals, he didn't have much of an answer for it. I think it's people like that, and the reason why I joke, those aren't the customers I want. They don't really understand how it all works anyways. They think because people like their page that they'll have a ton of business from it. Mm-hmm. And obviously the algorithms don't work that way. And this particular business, they can't sell anything online. So I don't know. It just didn't make a whole lot of sense. But, you can usually rebut that somewhat. So.
Yeah, it goes back to the whole it's a tool theory, right? Mm-hmm. It's not. See, everybody has a tendency to look at things binarily. Like, it's either this or that. And why not everything? It's just a matter of figuring out what exactly works for you. as the client. So
yeah, and that's another thing that we're really lucky to is having the internet at our fingertips and people from across the world being able to reach out all the time. You're not having to learn every aspect of every new tool or fad or social media platform that comes out when you can outsource work to people who specialize in that kind of thing, so you don't have to be an expert in everything. You don't have to run a social media marketing agency, Lee, but you can understand what it's about. And if you have clients that need that service, I'm sure you have people you can reach out to pretty easily. So I think growing that network of contractors or just contacts is pretty important for
absolutely
success.
It's huge. It's really huge. Can't tell you how many times I've reached out to someone in the last year, like, okay, you understand this so much better than I do, so we need to get together and discuss this.
Well, for example, me and you both know Sarah, don't we? Sarah Moore. So I've been constantly sending people over to her. The minute somebody says social media, I'm like, oh, okay. Exactly. And then hand them over.
Of course, now everybody watching this, as soon as somebody says an Alexa app, we'll be talking to Walt.
Exactly.
So going back to that, since I just brought that up, I know this is like when a customer calls me and says, how much does a website cost? And it's like the worst question of all. But what kind of range are we talking about for developing skills like that?
Quite honestly, it depends.
No. Yeah, that's a great answer. I love it.
I always like to throw that one out there and give them pause for the person to figure out exactly what that would be dependent upon. But no, it really is all about what the customer is trying to achieve. If they're trying to achieve some fancy, like, client customer management system through Alexa, you could be as high as, $25,000. If we're talking about a flash briefing app that gives you, a little tip for the day from, your tax guy, you're talking like, somewhere around in the $500 to $1,000 range. It really just depends. And, I hate to put numbers on it because I like to take each individual the way it is, but I'm going to have to package this thing up at some point because I know that this is going to get to the point where it's like, okay, but I'm having a feeling the way it's going to work out pricing wise, as we go forward, it's probably going to be about the amount of people that are using the actual app. Like if this thing gets successful, it's going to cost a little bit more to run it. So you're going to have to be around this price per month. So, but yeah, it's not just an upfront cost. It's also monthly maintenance, just like everything else that we do.
And that's one thing too that's interesting about when you can jump on technologies in an early stage is there's just not a whole lot of competition for it. So I was doing a thing with Kim Doyle the other day where she was talking about chat bots and stuff. So one of the questions I asked her, she was going through how to set all this stuff up and how you can use it and use cases and stuff. And I said, I didn't really want one for myself, but I thought, could I sell a solution like this to my customers? So I asked her, do you know what people are charging to set these kinds of things up? Because it's really not that difficult to do. You kind of set some automations and it just doesn't look that difficult. And the prices she gave for it were kind of blew my mind to like set it up and then keep those going. And I think a lot of that is just the newness of it. And there's not a whole lot of people doing that for a living or specialists in that area. So that's, one thing when you can catch those new technologies, you can also charge a premium for it too, and establish a name for being the person to go to for that.
Can I throw something into the ring for a conversation?
Absolutely.
I think one of the things that we often think about future-proofing our business, we're all thinking about what's the new technology that's coming up, etc. But also, if you think about a business, we should all be focusing on scalability within our business as well. Mm-hmm. So scalability essentially is the flexibility to handle like increase in demand, but equally it's also the flexibility to handle the decrease in demand as well. So it's ensuring that what we have already as it operates now can both grow and contract as and when we need it to. So one of the reasons why the big people like, say, Toys R Us fail is because it's no longer scalable. They can't just quickly shrink for a bit and ride out the storm and then expand again, because they have all of these stores, all this real estate, etc. Yes, I absolutely agree that we should be always teaching ourselves new technology and understanding that, and maybe going into new markets where we can and being the leaders there. But equally, if we've not made sure that we have things like, even things as boring as having our own systems and processes all documented internally, so that we know how to do stuff and we can do it quickly, and we can get someone else in when we need them to do it, so we can be working on something else. So one of the biggest things that we're doing is, I'm doing all this content all the time, but that's because we've got all of these processes internally that all of my team follow, and we often bring in contractors and we say, right, fire up that Asana, use that template from Asana, and just follow the tick boxes, essentially work your way through the project. So that allows us to be scalable. It also means that we can turn off those contractors when we have less business, especially over Christmas when no one's spending money at that point, everyone's on holiday. So that's something else I think we should be considering, is make our businesses scalable in such a way as that we can also, as the business owner or the leader, look out there as the entrepreneur. A book I'd recommend is The E-Myth Revisited. If no one's read that book, go ahead and check that out. Or if you have read it, go and reread it just to refresh your mind with that kind of franchise mentality of, process, procedure, etc. Sorry, my hat in the ring on that one.
Hey, I want to add one thing to that, like in terms of scalability. One thing that hardly anyone ever thinks about in our particular, like I've thought about it being in a startup before, but usually this is where this term comes up. But in order to be scalable in both ways, flexible, you have to ensure that there's a very limited amount of technical debt in anything that you do. And, that's just one of those things. I can unpack that on a later episode if you want me to, because it's a big topic, but it's a good pointer. Go out there and read. There's a lot of Medium articles about it, because if you're going into something that has been worked on, let me just put it in a quick little example. If you're going on to a web app, say like you've written for a doctor's office, and you go in there and it's something that's been written on in 3 different languages across the course of 10 years, the cost of redoing this thing is not near what it would be to actually fix what's the problem. So that's a real world example that I've had to deal with before. It wasn't fun.
I'll give a shout out to Mike Killen. He's very big on scalability as well. He's written a book called Single to Scale. You can find that one on Amazon. I'm not sure if it's out yet. I got an early copy, which is fantastic. But that's very much about this. A lot of people who listen to Agency Trailblazer, and I'm guessing a lot of people here on Admin Bar as well, maybe in the early days of being one person in the agency, or maybe a couple of contractors as well. And Mike kind of walks people through, how can you create a scalable business that essentially allows you to be future-proof no matter what's going on around you.
Yeah, I want to check that out for sure. One thing that's maybe not perfectly on topic, but I've kind of noticed talking with people and stuff, especially those people who are just starting out or trying to make the transition from having a job and going to running their own business, is building a runway for your business. That makes you a lot more resistant to hard times too. Being able to say, okay, if business completely went dry for 6 months, at least I could pay my employees or pay my bills and stuff like that. And making sure you have those kinds of business things and financial things in place is super important too, because you just never know when, it could be something completely unrelated to your business, like the economy, that you have no control over, and you have to be able to kind of ride those things out, because especially if the economy goes bad, it's hard to go get a job too, so building up some kind of runway for your business is super important.
And I think also, like, to add to that, establishing just a paycheck for yourself as well is smart. I pay myself every month the exact same amount. I know pretty much down to the penny how much my cost of living is and anything else. So, even those months that are a little bit lower, my pay doesn't necessarily change. I'm taking it out of my runway, sure, but my the fun things that I do during the month, they don't have to stop because I do give myself a paycheck.
And you don't do too many fun things.
No, I'm very boring.
I think you had a story about jack-o'-lanterns earlier, so we'll refer back to that one. All right, guys. Well, we got to wrap this up here pretty soon. First, before we go, I do want to ask Lee and Walt both, do you have anything you'd like to promote on here? Would you like to tell us what you got going on that people can get involved in?
Just jump with me on Twitter at Walt Spence. I'll converse with you there. That's all.
Cool.
And I would love you to be on the Agency Trailblazer podcast. We're looking for fresh meat to interview on the Agency Trailblazer podcast. So either add me as a Facebook friend because you're watching this live stream, I'm tagged in it, and say hello, or just head on over to agencytrailblazer.com and there's a contact button somewhere. I need to make it a little bit more obvious. Anglecrown.com. Contact me that way because it'd be great to get some fresh blood on the show.
And if you're nervous about doing it, I was certainly nervous my first podcast episode, and my first one was with Lee, and he's extremely gentle, so you'll be okay.
Yeah.
Lee was also my first.
Oh.
And he was our first together, me and Matt too.
Oh, wow. Oh yeah, because you were on the podcast together, weren't you?
Yeah.
That was my first interviewing two people like in two different places. I mean, I had the Beaver Builder guys on, but they'd all sat in the same room and there was like one lead, whereas you guys, it was really awkward. I couldn't work it out, but it worked fine. It was a great episode.
It's awkward just like this. Perfectly awkward. All
Couldn't
right,
have
I
it
do
any
got
other way.
Yeah, no doubt. I got a couple things here. So one, if you go to the admin bar website, theadminbar.com, we've made a bunch of changes to it because we were kind of all over the place with the different types of shows and things we're doing. So there's a tab on there that says on tap. So that kind of talks about these live roundtables we're doing and some other things. We got a thing coming up next month where we're doing, it's called the Tip Jar, where we're going to be doing some design critiques of people's websites they submit. So we got a couple people that have already submitted websites, and we're going to gently critique them and give them some feedback on things they could improve. So you can submit a site to that on there. Also, I'm going to drop a couple links into this chat here for those of you who are on the live stream. One is WP Builds has their ridiculous giveaway that's going to happen this Thursday on a live airing of their 100th episode. But tonight's the last night you can join in to be a part of winning one of the 180 plus things they're giving away on there. So definitely go check that out if you haven't done it yet. Also, today is the last day you can sign up for Dave Foy's No Fear Funnels course. So it closes until sometime next year. I'm a part of that. I was part of the first opening he had, I guess, earlier this summer, and it has been fantastic. And I was on some stuff with him recently talking about some jobs I upsold by several thousands of dollars just because of the things that I'd learned in there. So it's paid for itself pretty quickly. And last thing, Devender has a YouTube premiere thing he's trying out here in about 15 minutes on his YouTube channel. I just posted a link that will take you there. He's going to be live in the comments answering people's questions and talking to them about it. So when you hang up on this, you can go jump on there. So that's enough housekeeping for this. Walt and Lee, I greatly appreciate y'all jumping on with us today and taking the time. Happy belated birthday, Walt. Thanks. I hope it was a good time.
No, always great.
And Matt has a birthday tomorrow, so happy early birthday
to
Matt.
How old is he? He looks 21.
I think he's going to be like 31.
31.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just have that baby face.
Yeah. Good genes.
I envy you and that hairline, mate. Ridiculous. Yeah. Ridiculous.
Everybody was saying in the comments you didn't get the memo to wear a hat.
I know. That's why I got up earlier. I was trying to find my hat, but I have no idea where it went.
He spent an hour and a half getting his hair ready. There was no way in hell he was covered up with a hat on this live stream.
I know how Lee rolls, so I made sure to have my Lee Jackson uniform ready to go today.
Yeah.
I think off air I said that Walt looks like he's commanding a Star Destroyer in Star Wars at the moment. So it's because you're all in black and you've got that kind of peak cap as well. Loving it, mate.
It's a good look. All right. Well, thank y'all so much for hopping on with us. And I guess we'll see everybody on the next one. Cheers.
Bye-bye.